So, do you think that getting your bachelor's degree prepared you for teaching?
I think that getting a bachelor's degree in social studies generally and in education was useful. I do think some education courses are necessary. I think you need to have something about a philosophy of education. You need to know something about the psychology of students in your classes. You need to have some idea about how to approach different kinds of subject matter. I do think in-class training is the best training. Subject matter for teaching high school is only equally important to how do you deliver, how do you organize, how do you relate to the classroom as a whole.
And do you think, as far as classroom experience, would that be like substitute teaching?
Yes, in fact, I did do substitute teaching before I had a full-time job. When I was coming to graduate school here at San Francisco State, I was a substitute teacher in Oakland Unified Schools, and I substituted in middle schools and high schools in different subject matters, and I picked up really interesting ideas from being a substitute teacher. I would borrow lesson plan ideas and approaches to how they address different kinds of topics in the classroom. So yeah, being a substitute teacher was a very useful experience.
And what would you say to a student wanting to become a high school teacher?
So I think two things about that. One is having experience working with high school age students outside of the classroom, and then also working in some capacity in a high school. So, and even if you would be able to be a grader for a teacher or sit in on classes, but in some way doing some kind of volunteer work within an actual school.
So, Beth, what do you do for the county, the school district here?
I am fortunate to work with new teachers in the induction program. So my program serves all of Marin County, and we partner with new teachers and veteran teachers to clear their credential. So the new teacher, when they graduate from an induction program, from a university, have an induction program to go through. So it's a 2-year program, and then they clear their credential.
Somebody graduates from a 4-year university, then they come into your program, which is a 2-year program.
Right. In California, once you earn your preliminary credential, then you go through a 2-year mentoring induction program to clear your credential. And then your credential's cleared for life, and then you just renew it with the state. So it's a mentoring program to support new teachers across California.
So during that time, you are still teaching, or you can be.
You're hired, you're the teacher of record, and in those first 2 years, you get support of a mentor to help that be successful. So you'll stay in the profession for a long time.
Do you like your teachers to have a master's degree or a PhD coming, before they start?
Not necessarily. With the teacher shortage, we really take teachers right out of the university and are excited to have them begin in the districts and working alongside other teachers. And then we encourage them to go back for a master's or back for more studies after they really get to know the school and the culture and know what they want to dive deeper into.
Yes.
Right now, we have a hard time finding and filling positions with special education and math and science in the single subject area. So those are areas that districts are reaching out and looking for qualified teachers with a preliminary credential and are hard to find. So those are ones that I think are important to focus on if you are able to.
On a resume, are you looking for, like general criteria or specific criteria about like community service or some kind of background in particular?
I think that districts look for varied experience, but putting on your resume something that you're passionate about, something that has you look different than others, that you can speak to, something that you can bring to the table is always a benefit. So really looking at your background and thinking about volunteer experiences or work experiences that you've done that can be a value added to a school or to a district is always important, and being able to speak to it and share how that would benefit your students.
And what do you think about substitute teaching? Is that a good
I think
inroad?
that's one way to really get to know a school and get to feel the community and see if it's a good fit for you. And it's a great opportunity for teachers and staff and students to get to know you. And if something opens, and sometimes it's a sudden opening, there's a maternity leave or there's a part-time position that needs to be filled immediately, they often will lean towards somebody that's in their community, and the substitute teacher can be tacked on to ask to step into that spot that then opens up into something more full-time.
So in terms of how somebody actually gets hired, do they go to the district that they're of their choice that they want to go to, or do they go to the county?
So each district here in Marin County does their own hiring. We have a job fair in the spring, and so that's a place where we bring all of the districts together and do interviews and applications. But typically, on EdJoin is where you would see a job opening, and then you would apply for that and go to their district office in their small district, and principals and teachers from that school would interview you for that position.
Do you look at an applicant's e-portfolio?
You know, I think different districts do different things. So I think if you are at a grade level team, or if you're in an interview process, you want to have that available. And then if they ask, or if there seems like there's an opportunity that you could bring it in, then I would definitely show that, because technology is huge and people appreciate people who are bringing in that technique or those features where they feel comfortable around technology. So if you can say, oh, I have my own website and here it is, and just effortlessly bring that into an interview, I think that would be a benefit.
I teach at Redwood High School, history and English, and I've been teaching for 23 years.
So have you taught somewhere other than here?
Yes, I started teaching in the city at St. James, which is a K-8 Catholic school in the Mission. And I taught there for my first 3 years teaching. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I taught science and English, even though I was credentialed in social studies. And then I taught at San Marin High School in Novato. I taught 5 years there, both English and history. I got my first job right away in teaching after my credential program at Dominican at St. James in the city. I tried to get high school jobs because that's what I wanted to teach, but I couldn't, so I started in the city of the Catholic school, which is actually a great way to start. And I spent a whole year subbing in Marin, and I got a long-term sub position at the end of that year from April to June at a Catholic school actually up in San Rafael.
Oh. Did you think that the substitute teaching was helpful?
Yes. I mean, it makes you cut your teeth. I mean, I found teachers that were super prepared, and it was easy to sub for them, and then, you know, other places you were like thrown to the sharks. But I definitely think it's a good stepping stone.
What do you like about your job?
Oh my God, everything. I love that it all connects. Like what I'm studying to teach the kids the next day, you know, I'll hear something on the radio. I mean, I teach pre-journalism class, and I had a presentation that I did last year on secrecy in politics when we were reading All the President's Men. And the day I was going to do that lecture was the day after the New York Times anonymous editorial came out this fall. So, as you can imagine, that's what we talked about in class, but it was so relevant to exactly what we were talking about. I love that part of it. I get energized talking and working with kids. It's never boring. I'm always, I know it sounds cliche, but I always am having to learn.
How do you decide what you want to teach? Does the administration or the school district give you a curriculum that you have to teach, or do you get to decide some of it?
Yeah, we have quite a bit, because Redwood is such a high-performing school, we have quite a bit of latitude in what we teach. And the new standardized tests, I think, lend itself better, at least for social studies, to being able to teach the material how we want to teach it, using whichever sources and whatever events we want to focus on. I think for the most part, teachers are pretty empowered. I think at least in the public schools in California.
So what advice would you give somebody that was, you know, just going into teaching? Like, would you, something that you would think would be helpful on a resume, for example?
Well, even just having job experience outside of education is huge. And quite honestly, this, you know, because we're a high-paying district, a lot of teachers do their student teaching here and then get jobs here, and they've never been anywhere else. And to me, that's a red flag on a resume, because I don't know. I think you really have to have that whole world perspective that you know, a lot of schools have it tough, and I don't know, some of our strongest teachers here are teachers who've taught in really difficult schools and figured out how to work with kids when there's no support from home, or the administration is otherwise distracted with gun threats and bombs and stuff and is not there for the teachers. And I think that's a big thing on the resume that is helpful, is just having a variety of teaching experiences, but also having that outside, having done something else, whether it's a volunteer or, you know, Peace Corps, or, you know, working, you know, in the corporate world.